Welcome to the Art of Medicine, the program that explores the arts, business, and clinical aspects of the practice of medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Wilner. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Jon Appino, principal and founder of Contract Diagnostics. Jon's been running Contract Diagnostics for more than 10 years, helping physicians analyze and negotiate all aspects of their contracts, including salary, benefits, and covenants. It's been my experience that when push comes to shove at the workplace, it's what's written in the contract that matters. What Jon does is really important. He's going to tell us more in a minute, but first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, locumstory.com. Maybe you're curious about locums and how it might fit into your career story. But do you know all the different reasons physicians choose locums and how it works for them? At locumstory.com, you can hear firsthand stories as diverse as physicians themselves. There's not one solution for everyone. The variety of opportunities might surprise you. Locum Story is an unbiased educational resource. It has tools that let you explore trends in your specialty and compare different locums agencies. There's even a simple quiz to see if locums is right for you. Do your own research at locumstory.com. It's easy. All right, and now to my guest, Jon Appino. Welcome, Jon.
Thank you, sir, for having me. I love the name, The Art of Medicine. We could talk for 30 minutes, I think, on the name and what it means to you, what it means to me, and all the listeners out there. But I think the name is absolutely fantastic, and happy to be a part of this episode for the Art of Medicine.
Well, thanks for that. Well, you're episode 96. And originally, nice. The concept of the art of medicine had to do with clinical practice. And but as I pursued it, I realized that, there's more to being a doctor than taking care of patients. Although, frankly, I think that's the most important part. But Absolutely. There's making a living and getting along with administration and, making sure you're appropriately compensated for your efforts. So that's really
Well, I mean, it's like, just like an artist doesn't, they don't just pick up a brush and start the same day being world class. It takes training, takes dedication, takes an investment. And that's what physicians do by training themselves and by learning and by practicing medicine. And they come up with their version of their art, whether that's interventional cardiology or general pediatrics, and it obviously can change and morph into a clinical and a non-clinical career and a locums career and a contracted, W-2 job and a partnership contract. It kind of morphs, and the art is different for everybody, which I think is great, which is one of the things that we focus on at Contract Diagnostics is the story, right? We believe that every physician has a story and the story matters. It's not just a cardiologist is a cardiologist, and an employment contract is an employment contract. And every story matters, and I think it plays well with your depiction and the fluidity of the art of medicine. So I really like it.
Thanks for that. I went into practice in 1989, and at that time, most physician practices were owned by physicians. And so when you did a contract, when I did my first contract, it was with other doctors. It wasn't with an administrator. They might have hired an attorney to look it over from their end, and I had to hire an attorney on my end. But it was really a doctor-to-doctor agreement. But I guess it was 2016 or so, for the first time ever, more than 50% of physicians were employed physicians. And many times these are big institutions where, all of a sudden a cardiologist, it's not, Dr. Wilner, the cardiologist, or in my case, neurologist. It's, well, we've got 20 cardiologists and we need a new one. And you're more of kind of a widget than a person from the administration's point of view. So I think contract negotiations have really changed from a handshake to a much more technical sort of interaction. Do you agree that's true?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been in this business now for 12 years, and we've helped, tens of thousands of physicians. It's all we do are help physicians navigate the process of contract review, negotiation. We do custom compensation analysis for physicians, and we just have a blast doing those for the physicians. But obviously, we've seen lots of trends, lots of things change the from the private practice world to the employed world to private equity coming involved with certain specialties and, partnership deals. And we've seen a lot of change and a lot of flux over our 12 years of doing this. And, yeah, I think, I want to say we've seen it all, but, I'm sure that we haven't. But, I have some fond memories of working with some wonderful physicians who were in their 60s, mid 60s, and they had called and they had said, John, I've been by myself, or I've been with a friend for the last 30 years. And, they want to, the hospital wants to take my practice and integrate it, and put it under their banner. And, they gave me this contract and I've never had one of these before, and they're 65, 66 years old. And they say, I just want to work for another 3 or 4 years, let my staff, integrate well to the facility. And then I want to kind of fall off into the sunset. So we've worked with physicians who have been practicing for 30 years plus, and they never had a contract before. And it's interesting the questions they ask compared to the questions of a new grad physician that's starting their first job.
All right. Well, I know we're pressed for time, and I have some very specific questions to ask you. But first, tell me a little bit about your background and how you got in. I mean, you've had a lot of experience since you started, but how did you get started, and what kind of set you up for that?
So I've known my mother practiced, in a small town. I grew up in South Dakota, and she practiced, I knew all the physicians there. I was a biology and biochemistry pre-med major, and I wanted to be a physician myself. And I remember I was coming up on some of the last years of my undergraduate and getting ready to take the MCAT. And a lot of my mom's colleagues had said, look, John, this was back in 2001. And at that time, they were saying, John, the government's taking control of everything. You really should do something else. I think you should go into computers. And maybe I should have taken them up on their advice going into computers, but I didn't. So I finished my degree, and then I started working in various fields in and around physicians. I worked in pharmaceutical and in biotech companies. I worked in contracting entities, and I met a lot of great physicians, and I established some wonderful relationships. And I had started a company when I was 17 and another one in college out of my dorm room. So I always had that kind of like entrepreneurial spirit. And I always asked questions when I was around people. So I was around lots of residents and I was around established physicians. And I would always ask questions, what are the hassles in your life? What are the pains? What do you wish you could change about things? And of course, a lot of them are things that I couldn't impact. Government, rules and Medicare policies and reimbursement rates. And, but when they said, a lot of them said the recruiters are really annoying and they drive us nuts. And then we get these contracts and we don't know what these things say. They give us no business training at all. We're clinicians, we're scientists, and we don't know what these things say. And I had one friend say, I called some lawyer and gave him $400 and he told me the contract looked good. He was an oncologist. And he said he asked some questions. They really didn't know anything about oncology. They just knew the law. And he said, well, I was paid $400,000. I asked the lawyer, is that good? And the lawyer said, I don't know. He said, well, I get $65 for an RVU. Is that good? And the lawyer said, I don't know what an RVU is, and I thought there has to be a better way to do more of an educational and a coaching approach on this. And there wasn't a place where you could just come in-house and get, if you're in Kansas and you're going to Texas, if you're in Florida and you're going to California, if you're a cardiologist, if you're a dermatologist, if you're private practice, or if you're going to private equity, right? Or a hospital employee or an FQHC or fill in the blank. There wasn't just a one catch-all place that you could go. And I felt like there was a need. So Contract Diagnostics was born. And since then, we've had a blast and we've helped tens of thousands of physicians, and we've grown. We've got a fantastic staff now. We help physicians, across all states and all specialties. And We have our own very, very robust internal compensation data now, which we still have MGMA and the others, but our internal data is now real time and raw. So it's very, very powerful when it comes to negotiations. And we just have a blast. So I got into it kind of because there was a need. And we had physicians build it. I mean, I remember we did focus groups and we had evenings out and happy hours with residents and attendings. And we just said, look, here's what we're going to do. And what do you think? And they said, that's a good idea. That's a bad idea. One of the things that we do is it's called flex pay. And so residents and fellows, we said, look, this is what we think we would have to charge in order to make, $1 or $2. And they said, well, that seems reasonable, but I don't have that kind of money as a resident. So maybe I wouldn't buy this as a resident, but when I'm attending and I have more money, then I'll pay for a contract review. And I thought, well, that doesn't serve the physicians. Our goal was always, was to help as many people as we can. And we thought if we helped enough people, then we would make enough money. And I thought, well, that doesn't help people if they're not having their contract review because of cost. So we said, well, what if we just said, pay us $100 or $200 now, and then just pay us the rest over time with no interest at $100 a month? And they said, that sounds great. So we have flex pay, and residents and fellows can use flex pay, and they don't have to pay us any extra money. It's just interest-free payments over 5 to 10 months. It's really great. So those are the things, excuse me, I had a cough. Those are the things that we put in place that physicians help build our system and process that we're super proud of.
Well, I noticed on your website, I was perusing before we got started, contractdiagnostics.com, that you have resources, free resources, and you actually have a lot of depth in your staff. There are attorneys, there are other physicians. It's not just you sailing the boat. So I was not that there'd be anything wrong with that, but I think you could get overwhelmed. But it looked like you actually have a lot of depth.
There's way too much work here for me to do alone, and we've got a fantastic lineup of attorneys with all various different degrees of experience. Obviously all in healthcare, but we have decades and decades and decades of experience with our team here. As you said, we do have a physician on staff here, Dr. Catherine, who's a practicing OBGYN physician. She is our National Director of Physician Education. So she comes up with great resources. She builds great lectures. We do free talks all the time for residency and fellowship programs. Like you said, you can download these great resources on our website. We have a free 15-minute call you can set up with one of our attorneys here or myself just to talk through something for 15 minutes if you need. And that's all on our website. You can check it out. It's a pretty cool resource. And obviously, if they need help with a contract or a compensation analysis, is what we specialize in.
Okay, now this podcast, The Art of Medicine, actually evolved from my work in locum tenens. And I think really, actually, most of the most listened to episodes actually have to do with locums. So to address those listeners who are interested in locums, what about contracts for locums? They're usually like very short, one page.
Yeah.
Do I have to read it before I go on assignment? Does it really matter? Is there really anything that is important, or just
yeah? So obviously not the same as signing a contract with, a big signing bonus and repayments over years and a big restrictive covenant and, benefits and bonus structures and colleagues and all that. Much different. Like you said, if things aren't working out, you generally can be out of there fairly shortly. But I do think it's something you should, number one, read. I think it's good that you ask questions and do due diligence. Whether you have it reviewed or not, I would recommend it. But I wouldn't say it's a absolute must like I would with most employment agreements. If a locums physician, thought that they didn't need to get it reviewed, as long as they had good questions. And again, they can give us a call to get some good questions to ask. Dr. Catherine, our Director of Education, is a locums physician. So everyone listening is in great hands with Dr. Catherine. If they ever need anything, of course, they can email and call her, and she's happy to provide free information to them as our director.
Is
But
there
to
is
answer your
there
question,
any
I think,
particular, I mean, the salary you're going to negotiate, but
mhm,
it's, malpractice, or is there any line that stands out that you really ought to pay attention
yeah,
to?
I think they need to know how do they get out of an assignment? What do they need to give as far as notice to get out of an assignment? They need to understand the risk. So, are there damages if they leave early? What
Mm,
are they agreeing to for the schedule? What's the daily rate and what's required for work for that daily rate? Um, I would know if there's something in there that says, if you are hired full time by the facility, what does that do? Is there a fee that's due?
mm,
Who pays the fee? Does that impact a future signing bonus that you might have with the facility? So oftentimes what happens in locums contracts, and this is very common, so it's definitely not a bad thing or a red flag, it's a common industry function, is locums will help a facility find a physician to work there. Huge value for the organization, huge value for the physician. Physician gets a great job, gets to meet wonderful people, and gets to make a fairly good living. And typically, if the hiring hospital enjoys the physician, they may extend a long-term offer of employment to that position. And if they do, it might trigger something in the contract with the locums agency that there's a fee to be paid. Again, normal and typical, but the physician should understand if that does happen, who pays that? Would that come out of a future signing bonus? And then would there be any tieback? So sometimes we'll see the hospital will have to pay a fee to the agency. Therefore, if the physician leaves inside of 2 years of their contract, this is not the locums contract, but that might trigger the physician to repay that recruiting fee that they paid to the locums
mm.
agency. So it might not be something in your current locums contract, but if and when they offer you a employment contract, it kind of triggers a whole nother round of questions. And I don't know that that's something that you could negotiate out of in your locums contract, but something that you should definitely be aware for if the next step happens and you end up staying at the facility long term. But as far
Okay,
as your
so
general locums contract, yeah, know when you can get out if it's a 30-day clause to terminate and leave. Know what the requirements are. Know if there's any reimbursement for lodging or for travel and what those budgets are, what the policies are, and then know how you're going to get paid. And I think you're in good hands. Of course, malpractice insurance as well.
right, I think the locums to perm that you brought up is a very special circumstance, and a common
Mm-hmm.
one, but it does get fairly complex. Now, you mentioned, what's negotiable and what's not. I was at the Mayo Clinic 7 years ago, and I negotiated a new contract to where I am now, Regional One Health in Memphis, Tennessee. And I didn't know about you then, just kind of sad. But it's okay. I'm pretty happy here.
We
But
should be. We need to do more podcasts and videos, I guess.
yes. And so here's one thing that came up in these negotiations, and I don't remember what the question was. It was something about, I don't know, vacation time or this or that. And they said, well, we can't change that. That's our policy. That's the way it is. And I
Right.
was like, well, okay. I think it had to do with the restrictive covenant. I said, I don't really know if that's a good idea. And they said, well, we can't change that. It's part of the contract. Is that something you have to accept at face value? Or is that just something administrators say to move on? Or I'm sure you've run. Tell me about that.
So some people say everything's negotiable. Um, I'm not one of those people. I believe that there are clauses in contracts that are non-negotiable. I believe that there are policies, such as vacation time. We had a physician that was telling us, John, I want to negotiate the vesting period for the 401k match.
There you go. Something like that.
That's
Right.
not negotiable, right? It's a plan document from Fidelity that they have laid over for every employee there. They can't change it for one person, right? The CEO and the janitor have the exact same plan. I promise you, right? Lots of places have, and employers put things in place to protect them from treating one employee different than another, right? So they don't want to say, well, we're giving more to this group of people than that group of people. So they
Mm.
tend to do more just blanket policies. So the policy is everyone starts with 3 weeks of vacation, and the policy is everyone goes to 4 weeks of vacation after a year. And the policy is if you're single boarded, you get $5,000 for CME. If you're dual boarded, you get 7,500. And those are policies, and the policies might not be able to change. Now, there are some things that may appear to be non-negotiable, but they actually might be. And how do you find those things out is the question, right? Is you know where you have to, first off, you have to have good questions, right? Which comes from a good review and good guidance from a firm like Contract Diagnostics. And then it comes into asking those questions in the right order to the right person. And then if something's important to you, sticking to your guns. So we have an example of a cardiologist that we were helping transition from one job to the next. And we got clarification on the salary. We got him increased in one of they had bands. So here's the 4 bands that we pay cardiologists. They were offering this band, and we negotiated him up 2 bands to the 3rd band. But they still have bands. They were unwilling to change the bands and unwilling to put them somewhere in the middle of the band. So we played within their system and negotiated the band and made arguments on why he should be at the different band. But they had policies for vacation, and they said, we just can't change the vacation. Everyone here has the same. And he had a significant amount of vacation at the job he was leaving. So our argument was he's taking a slightly cut pay, but he's going to give up 2 weeks of time off, which is a lot more in pay. And what can we do to bridge the gap? And they were like, we just can't. We can't. And we ended up working it all the way up the chain, where we're on the phone with finance, we're on the phone with compliance, we're on the phone with the head of HR. And he got an extra week of vacation approved outside of policy because we were willing to go that extra step and keep asking questions all the way up and almost say, if you don't do this, he's not going to sign. And they really needed him, and he was a fantastic cardiologist.
Right.
So some things are, but again, if you're the 26th hospitalist and you're trying to change the shift pay, probably not going to change, right? At least not just for you. They might change it for everybody at the same time.
So in that scenario, the cardiologist really had to be willing to walk away. It's like,
yes.
And so what do you do? Say someone like me, I've been there for 6 years. I'm pretty happy. My salary could be higher, but walking away is, I mean, it's certainly possible, but it would not be an easy option because I'm pretty well established. So your leverage is different when you haven't taken the job yet than when you've been there for a while. You know, you own a house, your kids are in school, your wife has friends, all those things. So where do you get leverage from? Is there any way to get leverage?
Absolutely. So we have a new product called Compensation RX, and we give you updated compensation data. It's real time from day data that we actually pulled from our system. And there's MGMA data, the latest is included, and it's a 30-minute phone call. And so it's one thing to just give data, right? It's one thing if I say your median compensation for a neurologist in Memphis should be X dollars. 75th is this, and here's how many RVUs you should produce. It's another thing if we customize it to you, right? And it's no different than my cholesterol. My LDL is 78, my HDL is 96, now my fasting sugars are 91, right? Well, that's fine. But what if I smoke a lot of cigarettes? Or what if I exercise a lot? Or what if I don't? What if I have a family history? What if I'm 26? Or what if I'm 86? All those things matter. And that's why you can't just look at one number and say I'm healthy or not. There's a story behind it. And that's why we don't just give the number in compensation and say, there's your number. We want to hear your story. And then we customize our approach with how you could have a conversation. So I think it's always good to go to the employer in a situation like yours. And even if you're at a locums deal and you've been there for a while and you kind of want to stick around, you've been there for 6 years as a neurologist staff and you want to stick around. And you're on an evergreen contract. It automatically renews. It never changes. You have the same pay now that you did 5 years ago. Maybe your RVU rate was changed for everybody a couple of years ago, but it's barely similar. I think you go in and you just do a check-in with your boss. You know, you talk about how am I doing? What could I do to be more efficient? You know, what could I do to better lead the staff? What can I do to help you accomplish your goals? And lead in, right? Accepting and gathering feedback on yourself. And then have your story, right? So again, if you work with somebody like us, we can help put together that pitch deck that says, this is the data and this is where I think I need to be. And so it might come in and again, you can get creative with things. Maybe it's recommending a quality bonus if you don't have one. Maybe it's worth recommending additional admin time. Maybe it's requesting a new piece, like a new add-on to your electronic medical records that helps you code better. Maybe it's, receiving pay for the nurse practitioner that they've given you a second one when you didn't even want the first. Maybe you lost a colleague and your call has gone from 1 in 5 to 1 in 4. And that's a reason that you should ask for more money. Maybe, there's 1,000 things. Maybe there's an outreach clinic that you want to go to and you want to get a different travel RVU structure when you're out there. Maybe you don't want to do the outreach clinic anymore. So you're trying to figure out, how can I discuss getting back to the main hub and not going to the outreach? Because when I go to outreach, people cancel more and I don't generate my RVUs the same. So I say all that because it's a complicated process. And I think everybody should have their compensation. If your biggest asset as a physician is your earning potential. And I think that everybody should have that looked at, just like you get your oil changed, just like I go get a physical every year and I talk to my doctor about my physical health. I think physicians should look at not just their financial health, how are my investments doing and do I have the right disability insurance, but they should look at how much are they making? And I think we spend all these hours looking at, how do I shave 1% off my home mortgage, or how do I, clip a coupon to save 25% off a gallon of milk, or shift my credit card points to another credit card so I can get a free airline ticket.
That's a big one.
And people don't sit here and say, I make $300,000 and I haven't had a raise in 4 years. How can I get to 350 or 340 or 320? And there's a $20,000 gap or a $40,000 gap. And I could tell you 1,000 success stories on how we help physicians get $50,000 raises just by coming through our system and talking with us for 30 minutes. So I think that everybody should do a full checkup every year, every other year, and maybe every second year, every third year. I think every year would be overkill. But every second or third year, every physician should have data, go through it, talk with somebody like us at Contract Diagnostics, and evaluate if you should have a discussion with your employer. And if so, what does it sound like based on your story? So I can't copy paste language, but how does it sound for your story in your particular specialty, with your particular call cycle, at your particular facility, doing the type of work that you're doing, with where you are in your career, right? You want to work for 5 more years, go part-time and retire. You want to work hard for 5 more years, pay off your loans, then go part-time and have a family. You want to work for 2 years, maximize compensation, and then quit and start your private practice, right? So how do you take your story and customize the approach? That's where I think the art, if you will, of what we do is helping you guys formulate those stories and being able to go and pitch it to your employer.
That's very helpful. 2 quick questions. One, I think even under the best circumstances, it's an awkward discussion. I mean, most physicians are going to be just reluctant to engage in that discussion with the guy that pays their salary. But it's a necessary one. Do you ever take over that discussion? Is that something your group does?
We do. And we offer that. And we have physicians we do just for them, and we have group physicians. So we have multiple group negotiations going on where we're negotiating for groups of interventional radiologists, or we have a general surgery group, we have an OBGYN group, we have a big hospitalist group, and we're doing the discussion with the employer for them. And they like it because it puts a third party involved. Not that we don't call them and pound our fists. We don't call them and send them red line documents. We don't call them. We just call them and we ask good questions. And we try to come up with a fair deal for both parties. And it generally works out very profitable for the physicians with what they pay us and what they receive in return as far as increases in compensation. It's generally a smoother process working with us than working with the physicians and the 5 or 40 different personalities that a group may provide to an administration. So we can do that, but we're happy to coach the physician to do it on their own, of course, if they feel like they're wanting to. And sometimes I think it's better coming from the physician, and sometimes I think it's better to have a third party involved. But I do think that, but we definitely do that, and we can understand how that could be an awkward discussion, which is again why we're here to help coach and guide.
Okay, that's helpful. And do you ever, like attorneys, do you ever work on a contingency basis? In
We
other words,
don't. There's just too many uncontrollables. You know, it's not. It's yeah, it's not something that we are currently doing. There's just too many uncontrollable variables. It'd be like an orthopedic surgeon getting paid if the patient could dunk
right.
a
No,
basketball
no,
again.
I'm not saying you should. I was
It'd be
just,
tough.
curious. Is like, I'll give you 25% of my raise. Let's go for
So
it.
there's one deal that we're working on now, but I think we're going to get these physicians an awful lot of money. And I actually thought about doing that way, but I'm like, I don't. We've never done it that way. I don't want to reinvent the wheel right now. And so at the current moment, we're not. But I don't want to put it out of bounds. But it's an interesting concept for sure.
Okay, so we're getting close to time. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I mean I've got some extra time. I mean, this is important. If you think the listeners have other additional questions, I mean, I know we kind of touched on like what's not what's negotiable and what's not, and I think that's always a good question. And I think if you do have a request on the contract, if they say, look, we just can't change that, then a follow-up question would be, I understand. So everyone else has the same structure.
Just to make sure.
And
Just to make
I would let
sure.
them say, yes, everyone here has the same clause. And if they say, well, it depends. Some positions were grandfathered in and they're under other. Okay, can you walk me through how different positions are treated differently when it comes to the contracting clauses? And again, we're back in a very constructive discussion. We're not getting upset. We're not pounding our fists. We're not saying, I want that, then gal dang it. So I do think that there are some things that just cannot change and they won't change, and you can threaten to walk away and they will say, I'm sorry to hear that. And we've had physicians that have said, look, change it or I'm going to walk away. And we've had physicians walk away because of the risk that was involved with the position that they didn't like. So I think that a physician should be willing to do that. But I think that that's why, when we see physicians interview, I think you should have multiple offers. I think it's good to have and compare multiple offers and to have not just one place that you could go, but realize that there's 900,000 physicians practicing and the majority of them probably don't want to move. I think there's still a way that you could discuss and negotiate certain clauses in your recurring automatically renewing contract.
Yeah, yeah. So what about we've been talking about private practice and large groups. What about physicians who are in academics? They're employed by, I don't know, the
Yeah,
Mayo Clinic or the University of Tennessee. Can they negotiate, or are they just kind of stuck with whatever the offer is?
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, they can negotiate, and we see two very different types of academic contracts. We'll see an academic contract that is like 3 pages written like a paragraph. And they're very hard for us because there's no details in them at all, right? It doesn't say, and it might say like, and you'll have malpractice insurance, but no idea on what it is. It might say, you'll get paid, whatever, X dollars for doing 80% work in clinic and 20% work in academic, but no details on what hours you're working or how many blocks or when you're doing cases. It might say you'll be available to participate in the faculty practice plan bonus structure, but there's no details on it. So we have no idea if it's an XYZ component. We have no idea if there's RVUs involved or if there's quality bonuses or Press-Ganey scores taken into account or the profitability of the department or, and so there's certain academic contracts that require a lot more questioning than others. Others say Mayo on them, or they say University of Kansas, or they'll say, fill in the blank for an academic facility. And it'll be a 25-page contract that looks no different than any other nonprofit hospital or for-profit hospital, for that matter, as far as an employment contract. And they're not doing any academic work. They're a clinician. They're a producer with very specific terms. And a lot of physicians will look at that and they'll be told, well, because this is an academic facility, we just can't pay you like other people. And I look at those positions, I don't think that's any different than working as for a for-profit system or a large not-for-profit system where the CEO is making $10 million a year. So just because it says a university on there doesn't, to me, say that they would use the academic data set for setting compensation. So I think we see two very different types of academic deals. One is more of a, you'll be an assistant professor, the split's 80-20 clinical, here's the pay, very hard 3-page paragraph contract, and then a reference to a ton of policy manuals. And the other one looks like a more typical 25-page employment contract where, they don't have an assistant professor role. They're paying as a clinician with a bonus structure and tied to metrics, just like every other producing clinician out there. So I think it's important to know which one you have, and then of course which one is negotiable. And then if they, depending on which one it is, are they using the academic data set? Are they using the non-academic data set? Which data set are they using? And then all the same questions. What's the range of pay in the department? What are my expectations for production in the lab or production in the clinic? What's my expectations for talks and educating the residents? We worked with a hospitalist academic physician the other day, and we did the negotiation package, and it said in her contract, we will have admin time for the academic role. And it was a 7-on hospitalist role. And we said, well, what kind of admin time is there? And the admin time would only be during her week on, correct? They said, no. If we have interviews, we would expect her to come in on, and do help with interviews. And I'm really thinking, so she's 7 on, 7 off. She's getting paid for 7 on, 7 off, but she needs to come in for multiple days at a time to help with residency interviews and rankings. And she doesn't get paid a nickel for it when she could be with her family, or she should be traveling, or she could be doing a moonlighting gig making $2,000 a day or more. And so again, it's all those things that need to come into play. It's not just, here's what I get paid, here's the job. There's lots and lots of questions with every contract that physician should look into. And there's lots of them with academic contracts, of course, that are super important as well.
Jon, this is great. I thought you were the right guy to talk to, and that's why I reached out. And after talking to you for 30 minutes, I know you're the right guy. So
we love doing this stuff. I can't tell I can't say it enough. People think that I'm not being honest, but we started the company to help people and not to make money. And like I said, if we helped enough people, then we would be okay with making money. And it's worked out ever since. And I talked to Jan, my director of operations, and she'll ask me a question. And I say, Jan, you know the algorithm, right? Does it help people? Is it good for our customers? How much does it cost us to do this project? And then the fourth thing is, do we make any money on it or not? And the answer could be we don't make any money, but it's good for our customers. And then we go ahead and we do that project. So that's why we have a director of education, Dr. Catherine. She produces no revenue. She's a cost center, but she's fantastic. And we educate thousands of physicians a year. That's why we love doing podcasts like this. And that's why we have a 15-minute free inquiry on our website that people can hop onto. They can sign up for our newsletter and email us at any time. So you can feel free. Call me. I'll hop on a podcast with you anytime. And we'll do any kind of writing or lectures for residency programs or fellowship programs. And, we're here to help in any way we can, whether people want to pay us or not.
All right. Well, Jon, I want to thank you for joining me on The Art of Medicine.
I appreciate you, sir. We'll talk soon.
Before we close, I'd like to give another thanks to our sponsor, locumstory.com, a resource where providers can get real, unbiased answers about locum tenens. I'm Dr. Andrew Wilner. See you next time.
This program is hosted, edited, and produced by Andrew Wilner, MD, FACP, FAAN. Guests receive no financial compensation for their appearance on The Art of Medicine. Andrew Wilner, MD, is Associate Professor of Neurology at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center, Memphis, Tennessee. Views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this program belong solely to Dr. Wilner and his guests and not necessarily to their employers, organizations, or other group or individual. While this program intends to be informative, it is meant for entertainment purposes only. The Art of Medicine does not offer professional financial, legal, or medical advice. Dr. Wilner and his guests assume no responsibility or liability for any damages, financial or otherwise, that arise in connection with consuming this program's content. Thanks for watching. For more episodes of The Art of Medicine, please subscribe. www.andrewwilner.com.